made possible in part by a generous grant from the United States Tennis Association, the national governing body for tennis in America.
In those years, I was struggling to become well known as the first black player to compete against world-class champions.
Althea Gibson was born on August 25, 1927, to sharecroppers Annie and Daniel Gibson of Silver, South Carolina. Those days were rough on the Gibsons. In 1930, they only made $75 for their entire crop, a bale and a half of cotton. Their home wasn't much more than a dilapidated shack that didn't keep them warm in the winter or cool in the summer. In the face of such overwhelming poverty, Althea's parents decided to move north to Harlem. New York City, 1930, the Great Depression. Prohibition. Harlem was a mean place to grow up. At a time when bootleg whiskey was a means of family support, Althea was caught up in the wake of its misery. She was a wild and arrogant tomboy who established a reputation for being able to look out for herself. School was just a place for her to meet friends and decide how they were going to spend the day. Althea had an attitude, and no one could tell her what to do.
But what's the good of scheming? I know I must be dreaming, for I don't stand a ghost of a chance with you.
It was during the war, World War II. There was seen to be all the older guys went off to the service, which only left the younger guys there in control of the neighborhood type of thing. They kind of started these gangs. Not every block had a gang, but they had a territory. And the block that I lived in was so notorious that the gangs wouldn't come into the block, so I was always safe. The thing about that time, the policeman almost knew every kid by name, and you know who he was. So if he came through the block and he saw somebody that he didn't recognize, he would question, who is this guy? You know what's going on here? And that kind of kept people in, kids especially, in check.
I had the 28th precinct PAL, which was included about 200 kids. You had to keep them busy.
The thing about the PAL, it was an outlet that they can get you into some sort of activity. It was positive.
She lived right up the street here on 43rd Street, between Lenox and 7th. And she played stickball in that block all day long when she was a kid. I don't know how somebody grabbed her and taught her how to play tennis, and she hadn't looked back after that. She never looked back.
To avoid her father's discipline, Althea would often ride the subway all night long. Her life on the streets was a one-way ticket to nowhere. She was tired of being a disappointment to her father, tired of feeling hopeless. Her dreams were dying.
For I don't stand a chance with you.
Well, it was paddle tennis that started it all. At that time, my parents was living at 143rd Street between Lenox and 7th Avenue. And that happened to be one of the play streets. And they had all types of games up and down the street. Hoop basketball, marbles, loadies, and paddle tennis. And that paddle tennis court was right in front of my parents' stoop of that building. I think the address was 135 West 143rd Street. And one summer morning, I came down and a friend of mine, we hung out together, we played together, we roamed the streets together. We saw 2 bats and a ball on the paddle tennis court. So we started hitting back and forth. And from that moment on, we were the block paddle tennis court occupiers. We would get up in the morning, as soon as they laid the court out, we were the first ones on. We stayed on, and we challenged anybody in the block to play us. Nobody would. So that's how I got started in tennis.
In the summer of 1941, Althea finally accepted the helping hand of Buddy Walker. He introduced her to the game of tennis at the Harlem River tennis courts. He had seen Althea playing paddleball and thought she had talent. He told her if she played tennis, she would meet a better class of people and possibly make something of her life.
We have in those years a tennis club called the Cosmopolitan Tennis Club. That was I think it was the black elite tennis club in those years. And I was introduced to that club by the Play Street director of the Play Street named Buddy Walker, who happens to be a band leader. He plays tenor sax. And he introduced me to the club. And upon introducing me, the tennis pro there, Fred Johnson, who happened to be one arm, he lost one arm during the war, and he took me on to teach me how to play lawn tennis. Up to 46, I won the ATA Girls Singles Championship at the Cosmopolitan Tennis Club through the tutelage of Fred Johnson at the time.
Fred Johnson's task was no easy one. By this time, Althea had become a streetwise, defiant, and mistrustful rebel.
Well, my style of play, I believe, was aggressive, dynamic, and mean.
On Friday afternoons, instead of being in school, she would enter talent contests as a singer. Often, the Children's Home Society provided Althea with living arrangements, much better than her own crowded home. Althea's competitive spirit was legendary. One night at a bowling alley, she was introduced to Sugar Ray Robinson and his wife Edna. "So, you're Sugar Ray," she said. "I bet I could beat you at bowling right now." The three became instant friends for life. When Althea expressed an interest in the saxophone, he bought one for her from a pawn shop for $125. It was an amazing act of kindness that left a lasting impression on the young
Stars shining bright above you, Night breezes seem to whisper, I love you. Birds singing in the sycamore tree. Dream a little dream of me. Say nighty-night and kiss me. Just hold me tight and tell me you miss me. While I'm alone and blue as can be. Dream a little dream of me.
1945 would prove to be a pivotal year for Althea.
Althea had just lost the national championship. My father witnessed the match. It was on that occasion that he saw a lot of talent and was convinced that she could be an exceptional tennis player. He collaborated with Dr. Hubert Eaton of Wilmington, North Carolina.
We didn't know anything about her except that she spent a lot of her time in the playgrounds and on the streets of New York.
And since she was sort of dropped by the New York Tennis Association, they resolved to help her with the idea that if there were going to be an advancement or real breakthrough in tennis, Althea probably would have a better shot at it than anybody else.
Althea's destiny was staring her in the face. Ironically, the only way out of Harlem was through the segregated South, a South from which her family had fled.
You'll never amount to anything just banging around here like you've been doing. You'll be better at whatever you do if you get some education. Sugar Ray Robinson.
If it hadn't been for those words of advice, Althea might never have stepped foot on that train. And now she wondered why she had.
I lived with Dr. and Mrs. Eaton and his family. They were my foster parents who took me into their homes and provided me the opportunity to finish my high school education.
Althea wanted to get out of Harlem. She was accepted as a part of the family and loved and endeared by all. She came in with one suitcase with a saxophone along with her. And those were all of her possessions that she brought into this home. She was an excellent saxophone player. Like all southern cities in the 1940s, the town was totally segregated. All of the public facilities, restaurants, transportation, the neighborhoods were all segregated by law. Whenever she wanted to go anywhere in town, she was either taken, walked, or either had to ride on the back of the city bus to downtown Wilmington. This disturbed her no end, because coming from New York City, things were a little different. She was used to riding the subway or the bus system there, and there was no segregation to speak of where she lived, and to be all of a sudden to come south and be told that she had to sit in a certain section of the movie. And if she wanted to drink water, had to go to the colored drinking fountain at at Woolworth's, was very upsetting to somebody who wasn't brought up in that system. Althea was a tremendous athlete here, all around. Basketball, shoot pool, you name it, and she didn't already know it, she would learn it very quickly. But she, I understand, in a couple of games scored over 100 points. But all of the fellas admired her for her athletic ability. I saw Althea throw a football one time coming home from school. She picked up this football and threw it almost 100 yards. From one goal post to the other.
Althea's gregarious personality and athletic prowess were bringing her a lot of attention, not all of it positive. Look at her throwing that ball just like a man, they would say. And they looked at me like I was a freak. I hated them for it. I felt as though they ought to see I didn't do the things they did because I didn't know how to.
As soon as summer, June, early June, we would have these weekend tournaments. We always enjoyed the travel, especially when we were going north, because we didn't have to worry about segregated restrooms or problems of any kind. Above Washington, we enjoyed the music was better. Everything seemed to click with us.
She started out scholastically disadvantaged, but with her determination and her overall abilities and not let things get her down, she had caught up with the rest of the students and really was a very good student, but she was a hard worker.
All men are created equal. Some are better than others, and out there proved to be better than most.
At the age of 21, Althea graduated from high school. Sugar Ray Robinson sent her the $15 she needed to buy her class ring.
I graduated in '49 and immediately got a scholarship to Florida A&M. Upon arriving at Florida, of course, they wanted me on the Florida A&M tennis team. I started playing, started practicing, and as a matter of fact, I think Florida A&M won our conference championships every year that I was on the team.
Florida A&M was very supportive of Althea's tennis. When she played in the ATA National Indoor Championships in 1950, although she had lost in the finals, she arrived back at school to a marching band and a big welcome back Althea sign.
We all went down there, and she was very glad to see us, you know, when she got us. She apologized for coming in second, said she could have done better, you know. And I'm thinking now, who is it that could have beaten her at that particular time, you know, knowing the skills that she had? And I wonder what happened to that person that whipped her.
As far as racial prejudice was concerned, Althea was realizing that the only difference between North Florida and North Carolina was a line on the map.
We tried to tell them, first of all, to stay out of trouble. Try to avoid anything that would get them into trouble. So we did a whole lot right here on the campus, our social life and whatnot, primarily to keep from having friction, because we knew the climate was kind of explosive out there.
You had facilities down there that were segregated at that particular time. You could only go certain places, you know. And it was just like you read about.
People would say, you better watch out. You better not fool with her because she has coordination, she has muscle, and she can do anything a man can do. And the guys would kind of steer away from her because they were afraid that she could outdo them, and she could.
She was just an outstanding athlete. But like I said, we had no idea that she would accomplish the things that she did.
But she had the idea that she could do it.
I came on the scene as an upstart in those years. And of course, in those years, I was struggling to become well known as the first black player to compete against world-class champions.
The United States Lawn and Tennis Association, the governing body of amateur tennis in the United States, had Althea over a cleverly wrought barrel.
There wasn't an open door for a black person then to go into the U.S. Lawn Tennis Association and be picked to go to their tournaments because it was a rich man's sport. And it wasn't for blacks at that time.
In order to play in the United States Championship, players must first prove themselves in the major Eastern tournaments. By not accepting Althea in these tournaments, they were effectively barring her from the United States Championships. One member of the USLTA committee finally took a stand on Althea's behalf. Alice Marble, former champion and teaching professional, wrote a letter published in the July issue of the American Lawn and Tennis magazine.
If tennis is a game for ladies and gentlemen, it's also time we acted a little more like gentle people and less like sanctimonious hypocrites. If Althea Gibson represents a challenge to the present crop of women players, it's only fair that they should meet that challenge on the court where tennis is played. She might be soundly beaten for a while, but she has a much better chance on the courts than in the inner sanctum of the committee, where a different kind of game is played. Speaking for myself, I will be glad to help Althea Gibson in any way I can. If I can give her an iota more of confidence by rooting my heart out from the gallery, she can take my word for it. I'll be there.
My dad was on the board of the Orange Lawn Tennis Club in South Orange, New Jersey. And when they decided to move the Eastern Grass Courts Championships, which was one of the big tournaments of the year on the grass court circuit going up to Forest Hills, he suggested that they get Althea Gibson to play. He thought that she should have a chance. I think she was playing for the American Tennis Association then, which was the Black Association, and but he felt that she should be considered as a participant. I think it was her first opportunity to compete in our league, so to speak.
In the middle of August 1950, word came down from the USLTA. Miss Gibson has been accepted to play at Forest Hills on her ability.
It seems impossible to walk into a locker room and nobody sees you. But time and time again, Althea was not only not accepted, she was ignored. And how she could survive and sustain herself under these conditions was really remarkable.
Here was a first, and people weren't used to seeing a black person a first in tennis.
When she went to Forest Hills and they gave her cold shoulder, she was able to play her best game when the emotions of the crowd were not in her favor.
The first time I played at Forest Hills, it was against, I think, was the defending champion at the time, Louise Bruff. I was beating her. I think it was set apiece, and the third set, I was leading. And all of a sudden, the clouds opened up, the sky got dark as if they didn't want me to win this match. And the rains came pouring down. Lightning came immediately and struck the eagle on that corner of the stadium and tumbled it down. And they had to postpone the match. I had to sleep on that overnight. And the next day I came out, I didn't have nothing. I lost all sting and she beat me.
Being able to control her emotions was something that my father stressed, and she learned it very well.
The following year, Althea had her first opportunity to go to England and compete at the fabled Wimbledon. She had no money to pay for her airfare, so boxing great Joe Louis stepped forward and bought her a round-trip ticket. She became the first Negro ever to compete in that tournament. Although she did not gain a victory, she gained valuable experience. For the next 3 years, Althea concentrated on getting a good education at Florida A&M. She was about to meet another family that would welcome her as one of their own, the Darbins of Montclair, New Jersey.
We were playing in a tournament in Philadelphia, ATA tournament, and the ATA officials called me into their office and said Althea had received an invitation to play at the Eastern Grass Court Championships in South Orange at the Orange Lawn Tennis Club. We were wondering whether or not Althea can stay at your house while she's playing in the tournament. She lived in our house, and she met my brother William, and I think they hit it off right off the bat. But when Althea came to stay at our house, William and Radcliffe and Althea, we did so many things together and everything, and they got closer and closer. And all of a sudden, my father said to my mother, I think there's a lovebird in this house. When she graduated from Florida A&M, she accepted a teaching position at Lincoln University teaching physical ed. So she had taught there 1 year, and that's when she played at Forest Hills and was put out in the second round, and she was very despondent. And driving home, she said, I'm going to give up tennis. I can't live on people or this, so I think I'll join the WACs. I said, the WACs? Why do you want to join the WACs? So anyhow, she wrote a letter. They sent her application, and she filled it out. So we drove up to Montclair Center to the post office. She was going to drop it in. I said, Althea, don't drop that in. Your break is coming. Don't. You heard my mother and father say we eat 3 meals a day and you have a home. So don't worry about it.
Well, it was mainly competing because I was always a competitor. But being a competitor, I always wanted to win. So that was my main thing, is to play to win the best way I knew how, and using my God-given skills and, of course, the things that I learned through my coach, Sidney. He's got a mind for tennis that you would not believe.
She was a great competitor, and she would compete at anything, at bowling, at playing pool, at golf, at whatever. Now, she had that drive.
The Nationals were going on in Forest Hills, so she said, let's take a ride over and see the finals. As we were coming out the clubhouse, someone called her and said, Miss Gibson, may I see you? So she said, just a minute, buddy, I'll be back. When she came out, she had a big smile. She said, guess what happened? My break has come. That was the State Department. They want me to travel all over Asia playing tennis. And that was the break she needed because she had the talent, but unless you play competitive tennis with the girls you're going to play in tournaments, it makes no sense.
Your government approached her, I don't know whether you know this story, with a couple of air tickets for another girl who lived down here, Carol Fagros. Now, she was selected because she was blonde and gorgeous, and Althea was selected because she was a negress, and they were both representing different types of the community. And they were asked to go to the Far East on a goodwill trip for your government, who was paying for everything, and to play exhibitions in areas to show them that beautiful people can enjoy the game and negresses can enjoy the game, dark people as well. Tennis is a game for everybody. It brings people together.
In '56, I was on a Goodwill State Department tour. There was 4 of us. Ham Richardson was the captain. Bob Perry was the other male player. Carol Fagros was the female player, and myself. And we played in every city just about in Southeast Asia. And I won every tournament in Southeast Asia. Every one I played in, from Calcutta to Rangoon, Burma.
Around the world, I've searched for you. I travel on when hope was gone to keep a rendezvous. I knew somewhere, sometime, somehow, you'd look at me.
Everywhere Althea went on that tour, people would ask her the same question. What was it like to be a Negro living in the United States? Her answer was always the same. We have problems, but I think they can and will be solved. The kids were in awe of her.
I considered it a great education to be able to travel around the world as I did, being the first black female tennis champion of the world, to have this privilege. And I enjoyed it tremendously. I learned a lot, I saw a lot, and I played a heck of a lot of tennis.
One of the highlights of that tour was meeting a young Englishwoman named Angela Buxton.
That's how I came to Althea, because nobody would play with her. And I was on my own, and I was going to play mixed doubles if necessary. And she, I could see her now, she was sitting on the sidelines. It was too terrible for words. Hardly anybody would speak to her, let alone play with her. And my coach went up to her and he said, would you like to play with Angela? She's free. And she said, sure, I'd love to play with Angela. and we won the French and Wimbledon.
And there you have it. Miss Althea Gibson of the United States has become the first person of her race to win a major tennis title by defeating Angela Mortimer in the ladies' singles here at Roland Garros. And what a display of...
Althea set herself up to go into the 1956 Wimbledon in the wrong frame of mind. She lost in the quarterfinals to Shirley Fry. The next day, an article appeared in the Sunday Graphic.
This is all about the Yank who lost with nobility, and an attempt to salute Miss Althea Gibson, a colored girl from Harlem who served up an ace for her race with her serenity and graciousness in an unexpected and puzzling defeat. I accuse the Wimbledon crowd of showing bias against Miss Gibson, and I say it was this bias that helped rob her of her victory. I remember the voice of a Yank reporter at the press bar at lunchtime saying, "So Joe Louis became a champion, what happened? Nigger boxers came out from under every stone. Same thing if Gibson walks away from here with a tennis pot." At the press conference after the match, this reporter asked Miss Gibson if she would like to come back next year, and she replied, "If I'm asked."
I'm sure that there was prejudice, but I suppose I ignored it because I was so intense in my tennis, playing the game of tennis, that I didn't even think about it.
One of Althea's greatest rivals on the court was Shirley Fry. In 1956, after beating her in the singles at the Australian Championships, they teamed up, and for once in both their careers became champions together.
And I felt very lucky that at the end of my career that they wanted to see Althea play in Australia. She had just won on the continent, and I beat her at Wimbledon, and I beat it. This was my great comeback year. I retired and came back and won these tournaments. I beat her at the U.S. Open, and they almost had to invite me to Australia with her. I stayed there and got married, and she said, "I think I'll go home and marry, you know, my boyfriend." With that, she went on to win the next 2 years, you know, which was history.
In 1957, the USLTA showed signs of accepting Althea as a real contender when they paid her way to Wimbledon.
When I was to play the final match, and the Queen was there, I was in the locker room, and I got sick to my stomach thinking about it. And I said to myself, I said, Althea, all you're going to do when you go out there today, you're not going to pay any attention to the crowd. You're not going to notice anything. All you're going to do is watch that ball. That's all you're going to do. That's what I did. I was ignorant of applause, claps, boos. That was blocked out. All I was thinking about is hit that white ball. It was the greatest honor that I could receive to have the Queen of England present me the Wimbledon trophy as the first black female to ever win Wimbledon.
What a long way she had come, from the streets of Harlem to shaking hands with the Queen, from being forced to sit in the back of the bus in North Carolina to dancing with the Duke and being asked to sing at the Wimbledon ball.
Never let you say no. Don't say no.
That was a beautiful scene. People throwing confetti and Althea sitting on the back of a convertible just waving and everything. We went to Gracie Mansion and they gave her the key to the city.
I think that's one of the greatest honors any citizen in our country could receive. That shows that the whole public loves you, admire you, respect you. How delightedly happy my mother looks, and how proud my father looks.
Althea was selected for the Whiteman Cup team in 1957. Now it was on to the United States Championships. And the only thing standing in Althea's way was her old foul-weather friend, Louise Brough.
The women's finals, Louise Brough of California meets Harlem's Althea Gibson, and Althea wins it in straight sets. This is set and match point, and Miss Gibson's 8th attempt to capture her country's biggest tennis title is crowned with success. She becomes the first of her race to win the U.S. singles.
After winning the United States Championship in 1957, Althea remarked, "I thought it couldn't get much better than winning Wimbledon, but winning your own country's championship was something very special in my life."
I'm going to win Wimbledon, you know. And she was being beaten every finals by Angela Mortimer. Angela Mortimer was very, very steady. She hadn't got the big game that Althea got, but she used to beat her. And everybody was laughing behind her back, more than usual, you know. And who was the player that she had to play in the finals of Wimbledon? Angela Mortimer. And everybody was saying, now the chips are down, you know. And it was a very long, extended first set, I remember. And then she won, I think it was something like 7-5, 6-2 or something like that.
Althea became part of an elite group of the most notable figures of modern time when she appeared on the cover of Time magazine and Sports Illustrated.
I was defending champion in 1958. It was the final match against Darlene Hart, who was 3 or 4-time doubles champion. She won the first set, to my surprise, because what she was doing, I had not realized what she was doing. I was serving, and she was cutting my serve off, coming in, and catching it right on the rise, therefore beating me to the net, and I was considered a good net player. So she won the first set, doing just that. The second set, I scrambled, but I had to win the second set if I was going to defend successfully. And we came back out, and she started doing the same thing over again, beating me to the net. I was totally confused. I said, now here I am, the defending champion, about to lose. I said, no, I don't want this to happen. I started putting a shot on Darlene that surprised her. And that shot was lob. When she came into the net, every time she came in, I lobbed over her head. I threw a lob up. It was so perfect that it hit the chalk on the baseline. So that means she had to run from the net back to the baseline and retrieve that. Next time she came up to the net, I threw up another one. And it hit the chalk line again. The third time she came in, I hit another perfect lob, and it hit the chalk line, and that was the end of Darlene Hart. I defended successfully.
After successfully defending her United States championship title, Althea stunned the world when she announced her retirement from tennis.
I know that I'll be contented with yesterday's memory, knowing you think of me once in a while. Once in a while.
In those days, tennis was not a paying sport. Althea had many great wins, momentous wins, but she was never paid for those, for playing that kind of tennis. She had to resort to other ways to make money.
In my day, it was for peanuts and for cups, and for silverware, and not the bread, shall I say, to quote.
In her book, I Always Wanted to Be Somebody, Althea wrote, "My pleasures and interests are simple. I don't want to be put on a pedestal. I think I already got the main thing I always wanted, to be somebody, to have an identity. I am Althea Gibson, the tennis champion. I hope it makes me happy."
I told her to become a singer because there was no money in the game, you see. And I said to her, look, I said, you've got a fabulous voice. I hear you every morning in the bath. So I said, why don't you follow that path? I said, because that may fund your tennis for you.
In May, Dot Records released her first record album, Althea Sings. The song So Much to Live For was written especially for her by Professor James Kennedy, her voice coach. To Althea, it was much more than a song. It was the description of her life and her attitude at the time.
Carry on. We have so much to live for, to work and to play.
Ed Sullivan invited Althea to appear on his show. The performance was a good one, and she was invited to appear on a second show. Althea landed a role in the film Horse Soldiers with John Wayne and William Holden. Her role was that of a maid to a Southern belle heroine in the Old South. Althea didn't like the use of the heavy Negro dialect. She found it offensive. Apparently, the point was well taken, as it was conceded. The Harlem Globetrotters made Althea an offer she could not refuse.
Well, I made some money, just a little bit, when I joined the Globetrotters tour, went on the circuit with them.
Althea was to go on a national tour and play an exhibition tennis match. She enlisted her friend, Carol Fagaros, to go on the tour and play against her. Financially, the deal was a great one. In April of 1960, the tour came to an end. After paying expenses, there wasn't as much money as she initially thought. Uppermost in her mind was getting her parents, brother and sisters out of Harlem. She put money down on a house in Long Island. Finally, she felt right with the world. After being offered another tour with the Globetrotters, Althea decided that what she had seen was so lucrative, she would put together her own tour. After 3 months, it became clear. Too much risk, no reward. The balance of the tour was canceled, and Althea was financially ruined. Althea's financial salvation came in the form of Ward Baking Company, makers of the popular Tip Top bread. They signed her to a 1-year contract to make appearances around the country. At the age of 33, Althea made the decision to pursue a serious career in golf.
I joined the LPGA Tour in 1967, and Althea Gibson was already on the tour. She had joined in 1963. She was the first black female out there. She was Althea Gibson, and she came with a great name and had done some incredible things and was an American hero. Being a minority, being a black person or African American in the field of golf, which is was at one time almost a lily white sport, then certainly you're going to run up against many obstacles and many prejudices, and so no matter what your name is, if you happen to be black and everybody else happens to be white, then you're going to run into problems. She had to fight so many battles. She was also a very gentle person, and so I think that she has a great sense of humor, and she could, she would laugh about a lot of things. Although a lot of times it's just on the inside, you can laugh on the outside a lot of times, but you're hurting on the inside.
She had an excellent game, even enough to go onto the LPGA. She was out there in order to just qualify. Just to qualify for the LPGA, you had to be good. And she was that good.
Jerry Volpe, the owner and golf pro of the private Inglewood Club in New Jersey, invited Althea to practice there. Not only did he give her tips about the game of golf, he also made her an honorary member of the previously all-white club.
They never had a policy, any kind of discriminatory practices on the LPGA, and I know at the time we had a tournament director, Lenny Wirtz, was a very fair individual. And I know there were different times when Althea ended up having to change her shoes in her car because she wasn't allowed in the locker room. And also a lot of tournaments were called invitationals, and that was because they could invite everybody on the tour, but they didn't have to invite who they didn't want to invite. And they didn't have to invite Althea, but as what ended up happening is that our tournament director, Lenny Wirtz, took a stand, and so did the officers of our tour at the time. But he definitely took a stand and said either everybody plays or nobody plays. So the tour will not play in a town where they do not accept all of our players. And that was just how it was. It was cut and dry. Either they did or they didn't.
If a black person achieves in any discipline, be that person an architect, an engineer, an athlete, it assists the rest of us in whatever our pursuits are. It's sort of like people begin to say, well, by God, they can read and write and count.
When she came on the tour, she was one of the longest hitters on the tour. She was very strong. I'm sure a lot of that power came from her years of playing tennis.
Well, she could outdrive me. And I've been playing golf for many years, but she could outdrive me.
She would not play from the ladies' tee because she would take advantage of you if she had to play from the ladies' tee. She always played from the white tees with us because she could drive the ball about 300, maybe 3 1/4 if she got a tailwind.
In October of 1965, Althea decided to stop fighting the inevitable, and she married Will Darby.
Because of you, my romance had its start. Because of you, the sun will shine. The stars and moon will say you're mine. Forever, never to part. I only live for your love and your kiss. It's paradise to be near you.
For the very first time in her life, she felt she had become somebody in somebody else's mind and heart besides her own.
And I can smile because of you.
Althea was inducted into the International Tennis Hall of Fame in 1971.
First met Althea Gibson back in the early to mid 70s, I believe, when she was the athletic commissioner here in the state of New Jersey. Now, the athletic commissioner's job in the state of New Jersey at that time pretty much was to regulate the sport of professional boxing and what we call professional wrestling. Miss Gibson was the commissioner at that particular time.
The girl who was taught to box by her father for her own self-defense was now New Jersey's highest-ranked boxing official. Althea attempted a comeback in golf in 1980 at the age of 53, but failed to qualify.
I'm sure that she did that because she really felt within herself that she could do it, that she could make a comeback.
From 1963 to 1977, Althea played in 171 LPGA tournaments.
A quarter-finalist in 1956, and the winner in the next 2 years, the champion in 1957 and 1958, America's Althea Gibson.
Althea's a coach in New Jersey these days. She was a professional golfer for 7 years, and she's just been reinstated as an amateur golfer.
Ladies and gentlemen, Althea Gibson.
When Althea came to watch me play in the 1990 Wimbledon, when she walked into the locker room, I mean, I almost passed out. I didn't know that she was coming, and I knew that by the time I made it to the finals, I knew what had happened. It had been like 33 years since the previous black person had been in the finals of a Grand Slam tournament. Being in the same locker room that she had been in once before, and knowing that I was about to step onto the court that she had actually won and held the title, it was just so exciting for me.
She got through this through adversity in a time when it was an all-white world. The barrier has been broken.
She paved the way for the African Americans and a lot of the minorities to come in and play tennis and to be able to do well. So she was there from the beginning. She was a forerunner.
In 1995, life dealt Althea yet another devastating blow. The passing of the love of her life, Will Darvin.
The shades are all drawn. My heart is heavy as I gaze upon a cottage for sale.
When you think about Althea and you look at her, then going from having pioneering in so many different areas. You see people in such as the Jackie Robinsons and the Joe Lewises and the Jesse Owens. Those were all men, but when you see Althea, here's a woman and one of the first black women to have broken many, many barriers.
I'd like to thank Althea for all she did as far as breaking down barriers, not only for African Americans, but for all women. I know a lot of people think Arthur Ashe was the first person, to break down the color barrier, and it really was Althea Gibson.
Throughout her amazing career, Althea always found refuge from the pressures by teaching children.
I can't give you anything but love, baby. That's the only thing I've plenty of, baby. Dream a while, scheme a while, we're sure to find happiness, and I guess all those things you've always pined for, gee.
Althea Gibson was my first tennis instructor. The main thing I remember, not so much the technical part of the lesson, was the fact that Althea was extremely kind, very gentle, and awfully patient.
Althea had a really big impact on my tennis career, and the reason why is because there was someone that I could relate to, being an African American in a sport that was basically white.
I did a report on Althea Gibson as one of my, a biography report. I learned that she played in Wimbledon and that she won. The way she played tennis, it really inspired people and inspired me.
Althea is not only a role model for black girls and boys too, not just girls, but she's also a role model for others who are not black, because they can see what she accomplished under difficult circumstances.
People have asked me, do you know Althea Gibson? No, I don't know Althea Gibson. I've never met her. I probably never will. But I'll tell you what, I don't think that if you're born in Harlem and you receive the Wimbledon trophy from the Queen of England, and you receive the U.S. Championship trophy from Richard Nixon, and you get a ticker tape parade down Fifth Avenue in New York, I don't think you die in obscurity. It's not right.
It must have been cold there in my shadow to never have sunlight on your face. You were content to let me shine. That's your way. You always walked a step behind. So I was the one with
there's a song in my heart. Because of you, my romance had its start. Because of you, the sun will shine, the stars and moon will say you're mine, forever, never to part. I only live for your love and your kiss. It's paradise to be near you like this. Because of you, my life is now worthwhile, and I can smile because of you.
Althea Gibson, a documentary, is made possible in part by a generous grant from the United States Tennis Association, the national governing body for tennis in America.